Have you ever poured your entire soul into something? I mean, truly dedicated your life, your passion, your very essence to a craft, only to have it snatched away by people who wouldn't know real artistry if it slapped them across their perfectly chiseled, Botoxed faces? Well, grab a coffee, get comfortable, because I have a story for you. It's a story about threads and betrayal, about being cast aside and finding the strength to weave your own destiny. It's the story of how my arrogant, talentless boss tried to erase me from the fashion world, so I staged a public spectacle that unraveled his entire empire, thread by thread, in front of everyone. So picture this. For 20 years, I was the ghost in the machine at Aurelia Atelier. You've probably heard of them. Or you had. For a long time, they were a titan of haute couture in New York City. Their gowns graced every red carpet. Their name was whispered with a kind of reverence reserved for royalty. The public face of that reverence was Julian Croft. Julian. With his perfectly coiffed silver hair, his dramatic, perpetually draped scarves, and a vocabulary that consisted mostly of the words darling, divine, and revolutionary. He was the creative director. The genius. At least, that's what the glossy pages of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar said. But I knew the truth. My name is Eleanora Vance, and in my dusty, cramped workshop in the sub-basement of Aurelia's glittering Fifth Avenue headquarters far away from the cameras and the champagne flutes, I was the one who made the magic happen. I wasn't a designer in the traditional sense, you see. I was a textile artisan. I didn't just sketch dresses, I invented the very fabrics they were made from. My hands, stained with dyes and pricked by countless needles, created the impossible sheens, the ethereal textures, and the innovative materials that Julian would then parade on the runway and claim as his divine inspiration. For 2 decades, that was our unspoken arrangement. I would innovate and he would take the credit. In return, I had a laboratory, a sizable budget, and the freedom to create. It was a deal with the devil I had begrudgingly accepted long ago. The real devil, though, wasn't a preening peacock on the top floor. It was his handler, Beatrice Finch, the chief operating officer. Beatrice was all sharp angles and even sharper words. Where Julian was performative and flamboyant, Beatrice was cold, hard math. She saw my workshop not as a cradle of innovation, but as a line item on a spreadsheet. A very expensive line item. And as I neared my late 40s, she was starting to see me as an expensive, depreciating asset. I remember the day it all fell apart with perfect, painful clarity. I'd been working for months, no, years, really on my masterpiece. My magnum opus. I called it Luminelle. It was a bio-silk. A fabric woven with a harmless, phosphorescent algae strain that I had painstakingly cultivated and stabilized. It would shimmer with its own internal light, a soft, ethereal glow that shifted color with the wearer's body heat. It was sustainable, it was beautiful, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. I presented a small, hand-sized swatch to Julian and Beatrice in his blindingly white, minimalist office overlooking Central Park. He waved his hand at it dismissively, barely giving it a glance. It's cute, Eleanora. A bit of a party trick, no? Where's the drama? The passion? I need fire, darling, not a firefly. And Beatrice, her voice like ice cracking, chimed in. And the cost analysis? Splicing algae into silkworms sounds astronomically expensive. Our shareholders, Eleanora, prefer predictable profit margins, not high school science experiments. I tried to explain. I spoke of the potential. The sustainability angle that the press would adore. The sheer technological leap it represented. They weren't listening. They just saw a number they didn't like, attached to a woman they no longer valued. The final blow came a week later. I was summoned, not to Julian's opulent office, but to a sterile, anonymous conference room in the HR department. Julian, the coward, was nowhere to be seen. It was just Beatrice and a nervous-looking HR representative who couldn't seem to meet my eye. Beatrice leaned forward, a predatory smile playing on her lips. Eleanora, as you know, the fashion industry is all about looking forward. It's about youth, vitality, and new direction. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. I knew these words. They were the corporate speak for, "You're old and you're out." "We're restructuring the artisan division," she said, gesturing vaguely, as if the division was more than just me and my single apprentice. "Your position has been made redundant." Redundant. After 20 years of being the secret engine of their success, the soul of their creations, I was redundant. She slid a thin manila folder across the polished table. The severance package was a joke. An insult. Barely enough to cover a few months' rent in the city. I was to clear out my workshop by the end of the day. "And of course," she continued, her voice smooth as silk, "we'll need you to sign a standard non-disclosure agreement. And an intellectual property release. It's just a formality. It simply states that all concepts and developments created on company time, using company resources, remain the exclusive property of Aurelia Atelier." And there it was, the knife twisting in the wound. It wasn't just about getting rid of me. It was about stealing my life's work. They wanted my luminel silk. They had seen the party trick, and, without me in the picture to demand credit or a higher salary, they finally saw its potential for profit. I looked at her, at that smug, triumphant face. She expected me to cry, to beg, to make a scene. But in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. It turned to ice, to steel. I picked up the pen. "Of course, Beatrice," I said, my voice steady, dangerously calm. "Anything developed on company time and using company resources. I understand perfectly." I signed the papers, my hand not shaking once. As I walked out, she said one last thing, her voice dripping with the kind of false sympathy that's worse than outright cruelty. "Don't take it personally, Eleonora. It's just business. Julian feels the brand needs a younger touch." Oh, it was personal. And they were about to find out that this redundant relic was about to teach them a very, very expensive business lesson. As I packed up 2 decades of my life into cardboard boxes, my hands shaking now with rage, not sorrow, I made a call to the one person in the industry who I knew saw the future the same way I did. The first few days were a blur of shock and quiet, simmering rage. I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by boxes that felt like coffins for my career, feeling like a ghost. The ghost from the workshop, the one who was invisible for 20 years, had followed me home. But my anger, I soon realized, was a potent fuel, and it was about to ignite a fire. The phone call I made was to Leo Martinez. Leo was the young, brilliant, and frankly, rebellious CEO of Vanguard Textiles. Vanguard wasn't a fashion house. They were the innovators, the people behind the curtain. They were the nerds of the industry, creating smart fabrics, sustainable materials, and selling them to the few forward-thinking designers who understood their value. Leo was a disruptor. He'd been trying to poach me for years, sending subtle feelers and praising my work in industry journals. Work he knew was mine, even with Julian's name plastered all over it. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the prying eyes and gossiping tongues of the Manhattan fashion elite. "Eleonora," he said, his voice a mix of genuine sympathy and indignation. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. They're fools. Julian Croft couldn't innovate his way out of a paper bag. They didn't just fire me, Leo," I said, my voice low. "They're going to steal my luminel silk. I know it. They think they own it." Leo leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "But do they? The IP release you signed, you were careful with the wording, I assume?" A small, grim smile finally touched my lips. "Very," I replied. "On company time, using company resources." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick binder. It was my personal log, my secret weapon. For the past year, as I sensed the winds changing at Aurelia, I had become meticulous. I had purchased a second, identical set of lab equipment with my own money. I'd set up a small, clandestine workshop in a spare room of my own apartment. I'd done the most crucial work on the algae cultivation, the final, stable strain, the one that actually worked perfectly at home. On weekends, late at night, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread. I had receipts for every beaker, timestamps on every digital file, video logs on my personal laptop documenting every breakthrough and every failure. Aurelia hadn't just paid for my work. They had unwittingly paid for all my early, failed prototypes. The dead ends. The expensive mistakes. The perfected formula for Luminel that was all mine. And I had already filed a provisional patent under my own name 2 weeks ago. The look on Leo's face was pure, unadulterated joy. He exhaled slowly, a wide grin spreading across his face. Eleonora Vance, you are a genius. Not just a textile genius. You're a strategic one. He paused, his expression shifting to one of serious purpose. I'm not just going to give you a lab, Eleonora. I'm going to give you a blank check. We're not just going to help you protect your patent. We're going to build an entire collection around Luminel. We'll launch it under a new banner. A new house. Your house. And just like that, the ghost was gone. In its place stood a general, preparing for war. Vanguard Textiles wasn't a dusty workshop. It was a state-of-the-art facility in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I had a team, a real team, of brilliant biochemists and material scientists who looked at me with respect, not pity. They hung on my every word. We worked day and night, a manic energy filling the lab. The work was cathartic. Every refined fiber, every stabilized glow was a small act of rebellion. And I had an ace up my sleeve. My apprentice at Aurelia, a sweet, fiercely loyal young designer named Chloe. She was devastated when I was fired. She stayed in touch, becoming my eyes and ears inside the enemy camp. Her text began to paint a picture of chaos. Nora, it's worse than we thought. Julian is telling everyone he invented a living fabric. He's calling it, get this, or a glow. It's so tacky. They're rushing a cheap, unstable version into production. He's planning to make it the centerpiece of their Paris Fashion Week show. I read the text, and a cold wave of fury and exhilaration washed over me. They were walking right into my trap. Their arrogance was my greatest weapon. They were going to Paris. They were going to stand on the biggest stage in the world and present a stolen, inferior version of my life's work. I looked at Leo, a slow, dangerous smile forming on my face. We're going to Paris too, I said. The next 2 months were a whirlwind, a creative storm of a magnitude I hadn't felt in years. Fueled by righteous anger and Leo's limitless resources, I didn't just perfect Luminel, I made it sing. We created variations I had only dreamed of at Aurelia, a version that glowed a fiery, passionate red with a rise in body temperature. Another that shimmered with a cool, moon-like silver in low light. A deep emerald that pulsed softly, like a forest breathing. It was more than a fabric. It was a medium for storytelling. Leo was true to his word. He gave me my own division, Eleonora Vance Atelier, powered by Vanguard. We hired a small, killer team of pattern makers and seamstresses, some of whom had also been unceremoniously restructured out of other major houses. We were a team of brilliant misfits, a band of creative exiles, and this collection was going to be our revenge anthem. Chloe's texts became my battle plans, my dispatches from the front line. They're having massive problems with the aura glow, one message read. It's patchy. The color fades after an hour under the hot runway lights. Julian is screaming at everyone, literally throwing fabric rolls. Beatrice is just throwing more money at the problem, trying to brute force a solution they don't understand. I felt a grim, cold satisfaction. They had the recipe, but they didn't have the baker. They didn't understand the nuance, the delicate balance of biology and technology that I had spent years mastering. They had a cheap imitation, and they were about to bet their entire company's reputation on it. Aurelia Atelier, meanwhile, was starting the hype machine. Vogue, WWD, the New York Times, they were all running breathless previews. Julian Croft reinvents fashion with a revolutionary living fabric. Aurelia Atelier poised for a triumphant, luminous return at Paris Fashion Week. I chuckled into my coffee. Julian's ego was writing checks his company couldn't cash. He was giving interviews, calling it a moment of pure, divine inspiration. He claimed the idea came to him in a dream he apparently had after looking through my notebooks. Our plan was audacious. Insane even. Aurelia's show was scheduled for a Tuesday night at the Grand Palais, the most coveted slot of Paris Fashion Week. We couldn't get a spot on the official calendar. It was booked years in advance. So we made our own. Leo, using his considerable influence and a hefty sum of money, booked a historic, private art gallery just a stone's throw from the Grand Palais. He booked it for Monday night, the night before Aurelia's show. It was a classic guerrilla tactic. We didn't send out official invitations. We didn't alert the main fashion councils. Instead, Leo and his PR team personally and discreetly reached out to a curated list of the most influential people in fashion. The top editors-in-chief, the most feared critics, the biggest social media influencers whose posts could make or break a brand overnight. The invitation was simple, mysterious, and utterly irresistible. Vanguard Textiles invites you to witness the future. Monday, 8 p.m. An address will be provided 2 hours prior. The week before Paris, Chloe sent me one last, frantic message. Nora, they did it. They have a collection. It looks okay from a distance, but up close it's a mess. The seams are puckered where they tried to hide the tiny battery packs for extra light. They're relying on stage lighting and distance to hide the flaws. They have no idea what's coming, do they? I typed back a simple reply, my fingers steady. No, they don't. Pack your bags, Chloe. I have a front row seat for you. Our collection, 12 breathtaking gowns, each a unique testament to the true, unadulterated power of Luminel, was carefully packed and flown to Paris on a private jet. We weren't just going to a fashion show. We were going to war. Paris. Monday night. The air in the gallery was electric with curiosity. We had blacked out all the windows. The space was pitch dark, save for the faint, scattered glow of cell phone screens. The most powerful people in fashion were all there, whispering, speculating. What is this? Who is behind it? They were promised the future, and their curiosity had been piqued. I stood in the wings, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. This was it. Decades of being a ghost, all leading to this one, blindingly bright moment. Chloe stood beside me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and excitement. Leo gave me a firm, reassuring nod. It's time, Eleonora, he whispered. Show them what a relic can do. The music started. Not the thumping techno of a typical fashion show, but a single, haunting, beautiful cello solo. And then, out of the complete and total darkness, she emerged. The first model. She wore a simple, elegant column gown. But the fabric was alive. It glowed with a soft, silvery light, as if it were woven from captured moonlight. As she walked, the glow seemed to breathe with her, pulsing gently. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the audience. Phones, previously held low, shot up into the air, their flashes creating a stroboscopic effect against the impossible dress. Each model that followed was more breathtaking than the last. A dramatic ball gown that shimmered from deep ocean blue to a warm, living coral as it moved closer to the body heat of the front row. A sleek cocktail dress that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, like a steady, confident heartbeat. There were no hidden battery packs, no tricks of the light. This was pure, unadulterated magic. My magic. The finale was my masterpiece. A gown of pure white luminel, so bright it illuminated the entire runway on its own. As the model reached the end of the catwalk, she paused, her back to the audience. I had given her one simple instruction. I had sewn a tiny, nearly invisible heat patch onto the index finger of my own glove. From the darkness of the wings, I pressed a small, discreet button. The heat patch warmed instantly, and on the back of the pristine white gown, visible to everyone in the room, a pattern began to glow in a brilliant, fiery gold. It was a signature. My signature. Evie. The room erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar, a standing ovation. People were on their feet, critics with tears in their eyes, influencers live streaming with shaky hands, babbling about what they were witnessing. And in that exact moment, as the final model stood there, branded with my initials, every phone in the room buzzed simultaneously. Leo's PR team had just dropped the bomb. A press release, sent to every major news outlet in the world, timed to the millisecond. Breaking news from Paris Fashion Week. Vanguard Textiles has just unveiled Luminelle, a revolutionary bioluminescent fabric created by legendary artisan Eleonora Vance, formerly the secret genius behind Aurelia Atelier. Vance, who recently left the Legacy House, holds the exclusive patent to the technology. Her new brand, Eleonora Vance Atelier, will debut a full line next season. It was a masterstroke. We hadn't just shown them the future. We had given them the entire backstory, the betrayal, the theft, the triumph. We'd handed them the juiciest story of Fashion Week on a silver platter. Across town, in his lavish suite at the Ritz, Julian Croft was likely celebrating, blissfully unaware that his career had just been incinerated. The next day, Aurelia Atelier's show was a funeral. The word had spread like wildfire. Everyone knew. They knew. Aura Glow was a cheap copy. When Julian's models walked the runway in their patchy, flickering, battery-powered knockoffs, the audience was silent. A heavy, awkward silence. You could hear the faint, embarrassing hum of the electronics hidden in the seams. The critics weren't taking notes. They were checking their watches. Photographers who had fought for a spot were now aiming their lenses at the floor. It was a public execution. Julian Croft, the genius, was exposed as a fraud on the world's biggest stage. The show ended to a smattering of pity claps. I heard later that Julian didn't even take his final bow. Beatrice had to physically drag him backstage before he had a complete meltdown in front of the few remaining cameras. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Aurelia's stock plummeted. Their investors pulled out. Major department stores canceled their orders. Within 3 months, Aurelia Atelier, once a titan, was bankrupt, sold for parts. Julian disappeared from the public eye, a disgraced pariah. Beatrice Finch was last seen being escorted out of their headquarters with a cardboard box of her own. The irony was not lost on me. And me? My life began again. At 48. Eleonora Vance Atelier became the most talked-about brand in the world. We were on the cover of Vogue. The waiting list for a Luminelle gown was 2 years long. But it was never about the fame or the money. It was about the recognition. It was about seeing my name on the label. I'm sitting in my new workshop now. It's spacious, filled with light, and filled with young, brilliant minds, led by my new head designer, Chloe. We're not just making dresses. We're inventing. We're pushing boundaries. Last week, I got an invitation. It was to give the keynote speech at the Women in Technology and Fashion Summit. The topic they suggested? Owning your intellectual value. The art of the comeback. I looked at the invitation, and I thought back to that cold, gray HR room, to Beatrice's cruel smile, to the word redundant. They thought they could erase me. They thought I was a ghost, a relic from a bygone era. But they forgot one crucial thing about ghosts. They know how to haunt you. And sometimes they learn how to shine so brightly, they burn your entire world to the ground. So, what do you think? Was the revenge too sweet, or just right? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice, served cold. Because everyone deserves to have their name on their own masterpiece.